Mom called me dead weight in my own living room because I wouldn't let my golden brother move in rent-free and expected me to shrug it off. I didn't shrug. I didn't scream. I walked over to the door, opened it, and asked them all to leave my home without raising my voice. I was standing in my own kitchen, putting away groceries I'd just bought with my own money, in the house I'd just finished paying off last year, when my mother walked through my front door without knocking and said the words that ended our relationship forever. Your brother is moving in with you. This weekend. We already told him yes. Not a question, not a request. A statement delivered like she was announcing dinner plans. I set down the bag of groceries slowly. My father was behind her, arms crossed, wearing that familiar look of vague disappointment he always had when dealing with me. And there, sprawled across my couch like he already owned the place, was my younger brother Marcus, 30 years old, grinning like this was all settled. I took a breath and said what I'd been practicing for months. No. If Marcus wants to live here, he pays rent. Market rate. First and last month up front, plus deposit. The temperature in the room dropped. My mother's face shifted from confident to offended in under a second. Excuse me? He's your brother. Family doesn't charge family. You're single, you have extra bedrooms, and he needs help right now. I looked at Marcus. He was smirking. Actually smirking. I said, very calmly. He's a grown man who just got evicted for not paying rent. I'm not running a charity. That's when she said it. Standing in my living room, surrounded by furniture I bought, looking at walls I painted, she stared me down and said, You've always been dead weight. Your brother actually has potential. We are done pretending you matter more than him. The room went silent. My father didn't disagree. Marcus looked uncomfortable for half a second, then shrugged like she'd stated an obvious fact. I walked to the front door, opened it, and said in the same calm voice, All of you need to leave my home. Now. Chaos erupted. Mom shouted I was ungrateful. Dad said I was destroying the family. Marcus called me pathetic and swore he'd be living here next week anyway. I just stood by the open door and repeated, You can walk out, or I can call the police for trespassing. Those are your options. Eventually they left. The door closed. The house fell quiet. They thought it was just a fight, that I'd cool off in a few days and cave like always. They had no idea I'd been preparing for this moment for over a year. My name is Daniel Reeves. I'm 32. I work as a senior financial analyst. And I need to show you exactly how we got here, because this wasn't one bad day. This was 3 decades building to this. I was 7 when I realized my parents loved Marcus more. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small ones. When I was in 3rd grade, I won the school spelling bee. Studied for weeks, beat 60 other kids. My parents clapped politely. On the drive home, they spent 20 minutes talking about how Marcus, who was in kindergarten, had learned to tie his shoes that week. My trophy went on a shelf in my room. When Marcus brought home a participation ribbon 2 months later, it went on the living room mantle. When I was 12, I saved birthday money for 6 months to buy a used bike. Did the math, tracked my savings, negotiated at a garage sale. My parents said it was nice. When Marcus turned 10, they bought him a brand new bike because he'd worked so hard in school. He'd gotten mostly BS and 1 C. I'd had straight A's for 3 years. When I was 16, I got my first job bussing tables. Worked Friday and Saturday nights, saved most of it, gave my parents $50 monthly for groceries because money was tight. When Marcus turned 16, he wanted a car. My parents asked me to chip in as a gift. I gave them $800. They used it for a down payment, then 6 months later started asking me to cover the payments when things got tight. I did. Because what else could I do? I graduated high school with honors and a partial scholarship. My parents threw a small dinner. Marcus graduated 4 years later with a 2.7 GPA. They threw a party for 30 people with a cake that said Future CEO. I worked full-time while doing school part-time, finished with no debt in 6 years. Marcus went full-time, changed majors 3 times, took 7 years, graduated with $40,000 in loans. My parents co-signed because he's going to do great things. This is an investment. When I got my first salary job at 25, making decent money, my parents said congratulations. When I got promoted a year later, they texted good for you. When Marcus got his first real job at 24, entry-level sales, they acted like he'd been appointed CEO. Took him to dinner, bought him a suit, posted on Facebook about how proud they were. The pattern was always the same. I was supposed to be stable, responsible, boring. Marcus was supposed to be special, exciting, full of potential. And then the asking got heavier. When I was 27, my parents asked me to co-sign on a car loan. Their credit wasn't great. Just a formality, they said. They'd make the payments. I signed. For a year they did. Then came late payments. Then the lender called saying I needed to cover it or tank my credit. I paid. For 2 years, I made that payment while they drove it. When I was 29, they asked me to help with Marcus's credit card debt. Just a few thousand, they said. Help him consolidate while he gets back on his feet. I gave them $3,000. Never saw it again. Marcus bought a new TV 2 months later. When I was 30, I bought my house. Small, 2-bedroom, nothing fancy but mine. I'd saved for 7 years. Worked extra gigs. Lived below my means. The day I closed, my parents walked through and asked if I had room for Marcus if he ever needed a place to stay. I laughed it off. Said sure, for a visit. I didn't realize they were filing that away. Over the next 2 years, Marcus's life fell apart in slow motion, and every step, I was expected to be the net. He quit the dealership because the manager didn't appreciate him. Unemployed for 4 months. My parents helped with his rent, meaning they asked me for $500 twice. I gave it. Then he got a sales job at a tech startup. 8 months later, the company folded. Not his fault, they said. Bad economy. He was unemployed again. He moved back with my parents at 28. Slept in his childhood bedroom, played video games, sent out maybe 1 resume a week. They let him stay rent-free. Family helps family. I went over for dinner once and watched Marcus eat, leave his dishes, and go back to his room. When I helped clean, Dad said, "Leave it. Your mother doesn't mind." I asked if Marcus ever helped with chores. Dad looked offended. He's going through a rough time. We're not going to nag him. Marcus eventually got a retail management job. Paid okay. He moved into his own apartment. My parents asked me to cover half the deposit. I said I'd lend it. They said family doesn't lend, family gives. I gave them $800. 10 months later, he got evicted. Late on rent multiple times, then stopped paying during an argument with the landlord about maintenance. Claimed he was withholding rent until it was fixed. The landlord claimed excuses. Either way, eviction went on his record. My parents framed Marcus as the victim. Said the landlord was unreasonable. Asked what his plan was. They said he'd stay with them, but wouldn't it be better if he had his own space at my place to get his life together? I said I wasn't in a position to help financially right now, which was true. I'd been helping for a decade and needed to save for my own future. They didn't push. Not then. 2 months later, Marcus lost the retail job. Official story, budget cuts. Real story from a mutual acquaintance. Too many late shows and no calls. Fired for unreliability. Now Marcus was back at my parents', unemployed, bad credit, eviction on record, no prospects. And they decided I was the solution. First came the casual Sunday call. Mom said, "You have all that space. If Marcus stayed with you a few months while he figures things out, it would really help." I said I'd think about it. A week later, Dad called. Same pitch, firmer. "Marcus needs stability. You're his brother. You have the means. This is what family does." I said I'd need to discuss terms. Rent, timeline, expectations. Dad sighed like I was difficult. "He's your brother, not a tenant." I said if he's living in my house, he's both. The call ended tersely. Then came the ambush. Last Saturday morning, I was home doing laundry when my front door opened. I don't usually lock it during the day when I'm home. Big mistake. My parents walked in, Marcus behind them. Mom didn't say hello. She walked into my living room, looked around assessing, and said, "The second bedroom will work perfectly. Marcus can move his stuff in this weekend." I came out of the kitchen, confused. "What?" Dad said, "We've decided. Marcus is moving in with you. It's the best option. You have the room, he needs help, and it's time you stepped up instead of always thinking about yourself." Marcus sat on my couch, put his feet on my coffee table, looked at me and said, "Don't worry, man. I'll stay out of your way. You won't even notice I'm here." I felt my jaw clench. I set down my dish towel and took a breath. Nobody asked me. Mom waved dismissively. "We're telling you now. This is happening. He's moving in Friday." I said, "If Marcus wants to live here, we need to discuss rent and house rules." And that's when she said it. "He's not paying you rent. He's your brother. Family doesn't charge family. And frankly, Daniel, you've always been dead weight. Your brother actually has potential. We are done pretending you matter more than him." The room froze. I looked at my father. He didn't disagree, didn't defend me, didn't flinch. Just stood there, arms crossed, waiting for me to fall in line like always. I looked at Marcus. He shrugged like she'd just said the sky was blue. I opened the front door. Get out. The yelling started. The threats. The shocked offense that I'd set a boundary. And finally, the door closing behind them, leaving me alone in the silence. After they left, I stood in my living room for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't punch walls. I didn't call anyone. I just stood there, looking at the house I'd worked so hard to buy, the life I'd built with no help, the stability I'd earned through years of discipline. And something inside me went cold and clear. Dead weight. I'd spent 32 years being the responsible one. The one who helped. The one who paid when no one else would. The one who showed up, covered emergencies, co-signed loans, gave money I'd never see again, smiled through family dinners where my achievements were footnotes and Marcus's mediocrity was celebrated. And to them, I was dead weight. Marcus, who'd blown through jobs and credit and apartments, who'd never saved a dollar or honored a commitment, had potential. And I, who'd built a career and owned a home and kept my word, was the burden. I sat on my couch, in the exact spot Marcus had been sitting, and pulled out my phone. Opened my banking app, my credit monitoring, my email. I'd co-signed on my parents' car loan. Been making payments for 2 years. They drove that car every day and treated it like theirs, but my name was on the title. My credit was on the line. My money paying for it. I thought about all the times I'd given them money for groceries, or for utilities, or to help Marcus. I'd been subsidizing their lifestyle for over a decade while they insulted me in my own home. Dead weight. Pretending I mattered. I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. I didn't know them anything. Not loyalty. Not money. Not a place for Marcus to crash rent-free. I'd been carrying them. The moment I tried to set a boundary, they made it clear they saw me as a tool, not a son. So I decided to stop being a tool. I spent the rest of that day researching. Tenant rights. Co-signer responsibilities. Eviction laws. Lease agreements. Property ownership. I read forums. Legal advice blogs. Took notes. By Sunday evening, I had a plan. Not revenge. Just a decision to stop shielding them from consequences of their own choices. Monday, I took a sick day. Called a lawyer who specialized in family and contract law. Explained my situation. He listened, asked questions, then said something that changed everything. Daniel, you're not dead weight. You're the foundation. And they've been standing on you so long they forgot you could move. We talked for an hour. He explained my options. What I could do legally. What I couldn't. What would be clean and what would be messy. When I left his office, I had a roadmap. And I had one more piece of information I'd been vaguely aware of, but never really examined. The foundation they didn't know they were standing on was about to shift. The truth was, I'd been holding up my parents' life longer than I realized. That car loan wasn't the only thing. When I was 26, before buying my house, my parents asked me to co-sign on a lease for a better apartment. They were moving from their small rental into something bigger. Better neighborhood. 2 bedrooms so Marcus could stay when between jobs. The landlord wanted a co-signer because their credit was shaky. I signed. Low risk, I figured. They'd paid rent somewhere for 20 years. For the first year, they did pay. Then came late fees. Then calls from the landlord asking me to cover. Then an arrangement where I quietly covered about 30% of their rent every month while they acted like the apartment was fully theirs. It became automatic. Money left my account. They lived in a nice place. That was just how it was. Then there was the credit card. 3 years ago, they asked me to add them as authorized users to help rebuild their credit. I said yes, assuming they'd use it sparingly and pay me back. The balance started creeping up. Groceries, gas, larger purchases. They'd pay back half, or a quarter, or nothing. I started just paying it myself to protect my credit. I told myself it was temporary. It had been temporary for 3 years. And then there was the apartment itself. I'd always assumed they rented from some big property company. I'd never asked details. Why would I? But during that lawyer meeting, he suggested I look into the property ownership, just to understand the full picture. So I did. I pulled county property records, searched their address, and found something that stopped me cold. The building my parents lived in, a small 12-unit complex, had been sold 8 months ago. The new owner, Reeves Property Holdings, LLC. I stared at that name for a full minute before remembering. A year ago, I'd started looking into real estate investing to diversify savings. Took a seminar, read books, talked to a financial advisor. Set up an LLC as a learning exercise to see if I could manage a small rental property. I'd made one purchase through that LLC. A foreclosure deal. Small apartment complex needing work, but with good bones and reliable tenants. Bought it as an investment, hired a property manager for day-to-day operations, mostly forgot about it while focusing on my regular job. I'd never connected the dots. The property manager sent monthly reports. Rent collected, expenses paid, maintenance handled. I skimmed them, saw everything running smoothly, filed them away. Never looked at the tenant list closely. Never cross-referenced addresses. The building I owned, generating steady rental income and building equity, was the building my parents lived in. They'd been paying rent to my property manager, who sent that money to the LLC, which I owned. For 8 months, my parents had been paying me rent without knowing it. I called the property manager immediately, explained the situation, asked for the full file on that unit. It was worse than I thought. My parents had been late on rent 4 times in 8 months. Each time, the manager sent notices, applied late fees, marked it in the system. Each time, they eventually paid, but barely, living right on the edge. I asked what would happen if I stopped subsidizing them. Stopped covering other expenses, stopped paying their car loan, stopped letting them use my credit card. The property manager was blunt. They'd probably miss rent within 2 months. After that, we'd start eviction per lease terms. I sat with that information for a day. Didn't act immediately. Just let it settle. My parents thought I was dead weight. They thought Marcus had potential, and I was just a wallet with no feelings. They didn't know the apartment they lived in, the car they drove, the credit card they used, the financial stability they projected to friends and family. All of it was built on my credit, my money, my silent support. And they called me dead weight. I made a series of phone calls over the next week. Quietly, carefully, legally. Called the car loan company. Explained I was a co-signer making payments while primary borrowers weren't. Asked about options. They said I could be removed if primary borrowers refinanced or if I paid it off and transferred the title. Asked about current balance. $12,000. I decided to wait. Called my credit card company. Removed my parents as authorized users. Effective immediately. Pending charges would go through, but no new ones. Called my property manager. Asked them to start enforcing the lease strictly. No more grace periods on late fees. No informal extensions. If rent was late, start formal notice process immediately. And then I did something that felt cold but perfectly fair. I stopped subsidizing their rent. Stopped making their car payment. Stopped paying for anything that wasn't explicitly, legally mine. I wasn't cutting them off out of spite. I was just stepping back, letting them stand on their own. They'd been standing on me so long they'd forgotten what the ground felt like. For the first week after I threw them out, they tried the silent treatment. No calls, no texts, radio silence. They assumed I'd panic, reach out and apologize, that absence of their approval would break me. It didn't. I went to work, hit the gym, cooked meals in my quiet house, and watched TV without anyone asking for anything. Most peaceful week I'd had in years. Day 8, my mother called. Didn't apologize. Didn't acknowledge what she'd said. Just launched into a story about Marcus interviewing for a new job, how promising it sounded, how he just needed a stable place while getting back on his feet. Wouldn't it be easier if I just let him move in temporarily? No rent needed, just brothers helping brothers. I let her finish, then said, no. She paused. No. We already had this conversation. The answer is still no. Her voice sharpened. You're really holding a grudge over one comment? I was frustrated. You were difficult. Families fight. This is childish. I said, it wasn't one comment. It was 32 years. And I'm not holding a grudge. I'm just not subsidizing Marcus anymore. Subsidizing? You've never subsidized Marcus. I almost laughed. Mom, I've given you thousands over the years for Marcus. Rent, deposits, debts, emergencies. You know that. That was helping family. That's what you're supposed to do, right? And now I'm not doing it anymore. She sputtered. Tried guilt. Tried anger. Tried playing victim. None worked. I stayed calm. Repeated my decision was final. Ended the call. 2 days later, Dad called. Tried the logical approach. Explained I was being unreasonable. That family takes care of family. That I had resources and Marcus didn't. Basic decency to help. I said, if Marcus needs help, he can get a job and pay rent like an adult. Dad's voice went cold. You sound like a stranger. I don't know what happened to the son I raised. I wanted to say, the son you raised gave you everything and got called dead weight for it. But I didn't. Just said, I'm the same person. You just don't like that I have boundaries now. He hung up. Then the financial consequences started landing. First was the credit card. My parents tried using it at a grocery store. Declined. Tried at a gas station. Declined. Called the card company, who told them they'd been removed as authorized users. They called me, furious. You cut us off without telling us. I said, it's my card. You were authorized as a favor. I'm revoking that favor. We have bills to pay. We were counting on that. Then pay with your own money. Mom's voice cracked. We don't have enough. You know that. I said, quietly. Then you've been living beyond your means. That's not my problem. She called me selfish and heartless. Hung up. Second hit was the car payment. I stopped making it. First month, the lender sent them a notice. They ignored it, assuming I'd cover it like always. Second month, lender called them directly saying they were 60 days past due. They called me, panicked. The lender says we're behind. Did you forget the payment? I said, I didn't forget. I stopped paying. Silence. Then, why would you do that? Because it's your loan. You're the primary borrowers. I was covering as a favor. I'm done. But your name is on it. If we default, it hurts your credit too. I said, I know. I've thought about that. And I'm willing to take the hit if it means you finally handle your own responsibilities. Dad got on the line. This is insane. You're sabotaging your own credit out of spite. I said, I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm stopping enabling. There's a difference. They threatened lawyers. I said, go ahead. They hung up. The third hit, the one they didn't see coming, was rent. First of the next month, their rent was due. They paid it, barely, pulling together money they probably didn't have. But it was on time. Following month, they were late. Not much. 3 days. But the property manager sent a formal notice as I'd instructed. Late fees applied. My parents were furious. Called the management company demanding to know why no grace period. The manager, professional and detached, explained the building was under new ownership and management. All lease terms enforced as written. No exceptions. My parents grumbled but paid. Month after that, late again. By a week this time. Another notice. More late fees. They called demanding to speak to the owner. Manager said the owner preferred official channels. All communication through the management office. My parents didn't know they were yelling at my employee about my building. I watched from a distance. Got the reports. Saw late fees stack. Saw their stress build through increasingly frantic calls and texts asking for money, asking for help, asking why I was being so cold. I didn't respond to most. When I did, handle it yourselves. Marcus was still living with them. Still unemployed. Still no prospects. I knew because Mom mentioned it during guilt trip calls, trying to make me feel bad Marcus was struggling. I felt bad for Marcus, actually. He'd been raised believing he was special. Things would work out. Someone would always catch him. Now that cushion was gone, and he had no skills to cope. But that wasn't my responsibility. Not anymore. The cracks in my parents' life were showing. Car at risk. Rent unstable. Credit card gone. The financial support they'd leaned on for years had vanished. And they still didn't know I was holding all the cards. 6 weeks after I kicked them out, I got the call from my property manager. Mr. Reeves, the tenants in Unit 7, the Reeves family, are now 60 days past due on rent. Per your instructions, we've sent final notices. They have 5 days to pay in full including all late fees, or we begin eviction proceedings. I asked, have they responded? They've called multiple times asking for extensions or payment plans. We've explained that's not an option under current lease terms. I said, proceed as outlined in the lease. The manager confirmed and hung up. I sat in my office staring at my screen, feeling something unexpected. Sadness. Not regret. Not guilt. Just sadness that it had come to this. That my parents had pushed so hard, taken so much, given so little back that I was now effectively their landlord, enforcing consequences they'd spent years avoiding. 2 days later, my phone rang. My father. Daniel, we need to talk. In person. This has gone too far. I said, I'm listening. No. In person. Your mother and I and Marcus need to sit down and sort this out like adults. I almost said no. But something in his voice. Not anger. Desperation. I said fine. Not at my house. Not at yours. Neutral location. We agreed on a coffee shop the next evening. I arrived early. Ordered coffee. sat in a back booth and waited. My parents arrived together. They looked tired. Mom's hair grayer than I remembered. Dad's shoulders slumped. Marcus with them, looking uncomfortable and annoyed, like he'd been dragged along. They sat across from me. Nobody ordered coffee. This wasn't social. Dad started. Daniel, I don't know what's gotten into you, but this has to stop. We're family. You can't just cut us off and pretend we don't exist. I said, I haven't cut you off. You can call anytime. I just stopped paying your bills. Mom leaned forward. You stopped the car loan. Cut us from your card. And now our landlord is threatening eviction. We're barely holding on, and you're acting like it's not your problem. I looked at her, said calmly, it's not my problem. It's yours. Marcus spoke up. Man, what's your deal? You used to be cool. Now you're some corporate robot. We're your family. I looked at him, thought about all the money I'd given to keep him afloat, all the times I'd bailed him out, all the times I'd been patient while he squandered opportunities one would have killed for. I said, Marcus, you're 30. You've never held a job over a year. You've been evicted. No savings, no credit, no plan. And when I suggested you pay rent to live in my house, Mom called me dead weight. So no, I'm not the problem. Marcus looked away, jaw tight. Dad tried regaining control. Look, we all said things we didn't mean. Your mother was stressed. But this is bigger than one argument. We need you to step up. Help with rent. Cover the car a few more months while we figure things out. We need. I interrupted. No. He blinked. What? No. I'm not covering your rent. Not covering your car. Not giving you money. You've been taking from me for over a decade, and the one time I set a boundary, you called me dead weight. So now you're on your own. Mom's eyes welled up. You're going to let us get evicted? Your own parents. I felt the weight of that question, the guilt they were trying to load onto me, the familiar pull of obligation. Then I thought about what the lawyer said. You're the foundation. They've been standing on you so long they forgot you could move. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, opened it, and slid papers across the table. What is this? Dad asked. This is a record of every payment I've made on your behalf over the last 10 years. Car loan, rent subsidies, credit card charges, cash gifts for Marcus. Everything. They stared. I continued. The total is $63,000. Not loaned. Given. You never paid any back. Mom's voice was small. We didn't ask for all that. Yes, you did. Every time you called asking for help. Every time you framed it as an emergency. Every time you made me feel guilty for having stability while you struggled. You asked. I gave. You took it for granted. Dad's face was red. We're your parents. We raised you. We sacrificed for you. You owe us. I shook my head. You raised me to be responsible so I could take care of Marcus. That was the plan, wasn't it? I work, I earn, I pay, and Marcus coasts on potential. And when I finally said no, you called me dead weight. Nobody spoke. I pulled out one more document. Property deed. LLC registration. Placed it on top of the stack. Dad looked at it, confused. What is this? This is the deed to the building you live in. The one you're about to be evicted from. They stared. I said, I own it. I've owned it for 8 months. You've been paying rent to my property manager. You've been late multiple times. And now, because you're 60 days past due and haven't responded to notices, I'm moving forward with eviction. Color drained from Mom's face. Dad looked slapped. You own our building? I do. Marcus laughed. Sharp, bitter. So what? This is revenge. You're kicking us out. I looked at him. I'm not kicking you out. You're kicking yourselves out by not paying rent. I'm just the landlord enforcing the lease. Mom started crying. How could you do this? We're your family. I felt a lump in my throat, but kept my voice steady. You're right. You're my family. And for my entire life, I've helped you. Given you money, time, support, everything I had. And the one time I asked for basic respect, you called me dead weight. Dad stood. This is insane. You're punishing us because your feelings got hurt. I stood too. No. I'm protecting myself because you taught me I don't matter. And I'm done pretending that's okay. I picked up the folder, left the documents on the table, walked out. Nobody followed. The eviction took 2 months. My parents tried everything. Hired a lawyer who reviewed the lease and said they had no case. Tried negotiating with the property manager, who referred them back to lease terms. Tried paying back rent in installments. But by then eviction was filed and full amount plus fees was due immediately. They couldn't pay. The court hearing was brief. My parents showed up. I didn't. My lawyer represented the LLC, presented the lease, payment history, notices. Judge ruled eviction. 30 days to vacate. They moved out 3 weeks later. Found a smaller apartment across town. 1 bedroom. Much cheaper. Much less prestigious. Marcus went with them, sleeping on their couch because he still had no job or money for his own place. The car got repossessed a month after. They'd tried keeping up payments after I stopped, but couldn't. Lender took it, sold it, deficiency went on their credit. And mine, temporarily. I paid it off to clear my name and took the hit as a lesson in who I co-signed for. Mom tried calling a few times after the eviction. I didn't answer. She left voicemails. Long, rambling ones where she cried and said she didn't understand how I could do this, be so cruel. Family was supposed to forgive. I listened once, then deleted them. Dad sent 1 email. Short. You've made your point. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. I'm not happy, but I'm not unhappy either. I'm just clear. I kept the apartment building. Good investment. Raised rent on my parents' old unit to market rate. Rented to a young couple who pay on time and take care of the place. Rental income covers mortgage and builds equity. I sold the car loan debt to collections for pennies on the dollar, wrote off the loss. Hurt my credit 6 months, then recovered. Kept my job, got another promotion, started putting more into retirement and savings. Without the constant drain of their emergencies, my finances are healthier than ever. I still live in my house. Still quiet. Still mine. Made improvements. New paint. Better furniture. Thinking about getting a dog. I don't talk to my parents. Don't talk to Marcus. Don't attend family events. Not invited, wouldn't go if I were. Some extended family reached out, confused. I gave them the short version. Fundamental disagreement about boundaries and financial responsibility. We've gone separate ways. A few understood. A few took their side. Most stayed out of it. My cousin, who'd always been closer to me than Marcus, sent a message months later. I don't know the whole story, but I know you. You wouldn't do this unless you had to. I'm here if you need to talk. I appreciated that. I've thought a lot about what Mom said. Dead weight. Still stings sometimes, late at night when the house is quiet. But it also clarified something important. I spent my whole life trying to prove I mattered. Trying to earn their respect, their pride, their acknowledgement. No matter what I did, it was never enough. Because the problem wasn't me. It was them. They needed me smaller so Marcus could be bigger. They needed me as the foundation so they could build their dreams on top of me. When I finally stood up and said no, they couldn't handle it. I'm not dead weight. I was the only thing holding them up. And now that I've stepped aside, they're learning what it's like to stand on their own. I don't wish them harm. I don't celebrate their struggles. But I don't regret my choices. I chose myself. I chose my future. I chose to stop being the safety net for people who saw me as an obligation, not a person. Some people say I should forgive them. That family is family. That time heals all wounds. Maybe. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting them back in. Doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. Doesn't mean going back to being their wallet and backup plan. I've forgiven them in the sense that I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. I saw Mom once, months ago, at a grocery store. She was in checkout ahead of me. Looked older, tired, worn by stress. Didn't see me. I stood watching her count out cash for groceries. Exact change, clearly on a tight budget. I felt sad for her, but not guilty. I paid for my groceries and left. My life now is smaller in some ways. No big family dinners. No holiday gatherings. No phone calls asking how I'm doing. But it's also bigger. I have space to breathe. Money to save. A future that belongs to me. I started dating someone. She's kind, independent, has her own career. Asked once why I don't talk to my family. I told her the short version. She said, "That sounds hard, but I respect you set boundaries." That meant more than any apology my parents could give. I'm 33 now. Own a home. Own a rental property. Have a good job and stable life. Building something that's mine, not something for someone else to take credit for. I don't know what my parents tell people about me. Don't know if Marcus ever got a job or figured his life out. I don't need to know, because I've learned what I needed to learn. I'm not dead weight. I'm not a wallet. I'm not a backup plan. I'm a person who deserves respect. And if my family can't give me that, they don't deserve access to my life. Some days I miss what I thought we were. Some days I wish things had been different. But I don't regret walking away from people who saw me as a burden instead of a blessing. I'm free now. And that's worth more than all the money I ever gave them.